The Stump in the Forest, written by me, Dr. Heinous. There is a tree stump in a specific cluster of dense woods that spawned the legend that haunts my hometown to this day. The story is a fairy tale of sorts, the town myth, a 300-year-old legend with basic facts to support its basis, but the body of the tale is surrounded by a mist of unbelievable hearsay and a little bit of magic. I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts. Kids would tell this story to incite fear into new students, or use it as a rite of passage for younger ones, betting they wouldn't go into the forest after hearing it, let alone find the specific stump. It was always said the stump would be easy to find, not only because the spell was carved down its trunk, but it stood alone in its own clearing after the townspeople tried to burn it down, only accomplishing setting fire to the surrounding trees. The 4-foot stump couldn't be burned. It would dull the blade on any axe, and its roots could not be disturbed by any ox. She made sure of it. She made sure it would be protected, so it could fulfill its purpose. Her daughter was gorgeous, they say. An unaged porcelain face, though she had wandered around the property for decades. She never went into town, but could sometimes be seen dancing just inside the wood line. And no matter where you were, no matter how hard you hid, if your stare was longer than a few seconds, she would stop and turn in your direction and stare with that perpetually expressionless face. Despite her beauty, it was said that her stare would fill the onlooker with despair and force them to look away, only to look back to find her nowhere in sight. They would then live out their days in a poor mental state. The facts that surrounded the woman was that her mother, Abigail Hitchens, walked into town one day alone and purchased the wooded land, requesting that no one ever bother her, and that's the last they saw of her. Years later, glimpses of the young woman started to haunt the woodlines of the property, seemingly waiting for someone to look, just to send them away with the overwhelming feeling of dread. Eventually, people stopped looking towards the woods altogether, causing the old woman and her hauntingly beautiful daughter to fade into nothing more than a peculiar memory, but the woods would always remain off limits. It was 35 years after the initial sighting of the girl that the mayor's 16-year-old son, William Phipps, became infatuated with the thought of seeing her. He had caught a glimpse of her when he was a kid, sparking his obsession. When the thought of her sent chills down most people's spines, to William it was intriguing. Intriguing enough that he sat with his 3 friends across from the wooded property after school for weeks to catch a glimpse of the girl. One day, she finally showed herself. The white spot in the distance seemed to weave back and forth between the trees. As it got closer, they could make out the shape of a woman, which seemed to glide across the ground as she flailed her arms gracefully in the air. Her dress was being whipped around by the wind as she spun, before stopping in place, paralyzing the boys with a stare. After a moment, the boys turned and ran, all but William, who matched her stare with his own. William wasn't exactly what you would consider brave. He refused to collect milk from the cows in fear of being kicked, but his obsession with the girl gave him the courage to match her gaze and even rise to his feet. His heart pounded, forcing the blood through his body, allowing him to walk down the grassy hill and cross the road, all the while at the audience of the girl, now still as a statue, a stare, blank as paper. William stopped within feet of the girl. Though her stare was dull, her face was beautiful, like that of a china doll. He was terrified, which only intensified his curiosity. William's friends returned just in time to witness the girl lead him into the woods. The story can be told in such detail due to the journals William started to keep after the initial meeting. Multiple entries describing his staggered encounters with the girl in the woods. Entries depicting the girl, swaying back and forth, twirling her hands as she led him deeper into the forest with each passing day. He wrote that she would often be fixated on a certain type of animal and follow these types for days. The odd part was, they would treat her as their own, going as far as even offering her food. Her carefree quirks fascinated William in such a way that he felt a love growing deeper than the forest that he had become so familiar with. Though she never said a word, he knew she felt the same. It became known around town that the Phipps boy had been fraternizing with the mysterious girl that had been periodically seen for the past 4 decades. His father, the mayor, expressed his disapproval, yet, as boys often do, William disobeyed and continued to follow the flailing figure into the woods. The following passage quotes directly from William Phipps's journal. October 18th, 1691. Though I long to hear her voice, my feelings for her silence are strong as well. Today my love carried me further into the forest, a young red fox by her side. It seemed to be unusually affectionate, as if she had raised it from birth, though I've never seen it. Today the usual wanderous path at casual pace changed to a directed course with moderate haste. The destination was a 4-foot stump. Though I noticed the intricate markings and symbols that covered its trunk, my full attention was on the corpse of the adult female fox resting atop with a gaping hole in its chest. Though I didn't expect an answer, I gave my love a questioning look, only for her to respond by leaning down and nuzzling the decaying corpse, rubbing her pale face across its forehead. By the time the sun had faded, the symbols still eluded me and my love had vanished like she normally does. William continues writing, describing his walk back through the forest for the first time, at night. Though he had come to know the forest, this new dark dimension it had transformed into had William fearing that he wouldn't find his way out. That is, until he came upon an old log cabin. There was nothing particularly strange about the cabin, but the surrounding trees being decorated with hanging ornaments resembling the symbols on the trunk gave William chills. Furthermore, they appeared to be constructed from bones, as they blew in the wind, creating a popping sound like demented wind chimes. His attention quickly switched to the little old woman emerging from the forest, followed by the girl carrying a cage, housing a small white rabbit. The old woman struggled to walk even though she had the support of a walking staff. Her long gray hair surrounded her sagging face, and a necklace made of bones surrounded her thin neck. It cracked and popped as she led the girl past the cabin, towards the woodline opposite of their entrance. William stared, waiting for the inevitable. As the old woman disappeared into the forest, the girl's head twisted back in his direction. Her stride unwavered. Her gaze faded with the rest of her body as she merged with the shadows of the trees. William followed the popping sounds of the old woman's necklace back to the stump, where she held the rabbit down and held a dagger high over her head. After chanting a series of unintelligible words, she thrust the dagger deep into the rabbit's chest, causing it to produce a shrill cry. William stumbled back in shock, snapping a twig and gaining the attention of the girl and the old woman. As if reflex, he turned and ran into the woods. William ran as fast as he could through the darkness, getting snagged on every stray branch, the popping of the old woman's necklace growing faint. If he hadn't known better, he thought the trees were trying to grab him. What didn't snatch his clothes caught his skin like hanging fish hooks. After what seemed like miles, William finally exited the forest and crossed the road. He ran into town, through the city square and into the bar that his father could be found in on Friday night. William frantically told his father and the drunken audience his story. He told them about the little old woman with bones. He spoke of the bunny rabbit, the dagger, and the stump. Outraged, the mayor gathered his citizens in the square, lit countless torches, and armed themselves with melee weapons. They had heard of witches and assumed that the case, or at the least Satanism. William pleaded with his father to spare the girl and expressed his love, but the boom from the raging mob dissipated his words like smoke in the wind. They marched on, blindly into the forest. William knew exactly where to go. The woods had been his home for months, and now he knew of the cabin. It would take the townsfolk hours, if not days, to find it, which gave him plenty of time to find the girl and leave town. As he ran through the dark forest that still felt as though it was trying to take him, he started to question why he even ran in the first place. Sure, that was a big-ass dagger, but the old woman was so small and so frail, barely able to walk. As he ran, he saw a faint white haze up ahead. As he approached the girl, he slowed within inches of her, the closest he had ever been. She was even more beautiful up close, almost to the point that her face couldn't be real. He grabbed her hand, the first touch. It was cold and hard. Not that he tried, but if he had squeezed with all of his strength, her fingers still wouldn't have budged. Despite this, he pulled her into his chest and held her close. He explained that they had to leave and that he couldn't lose her. He turned and tugged on her arm, but was met with such resistance that it turned him back around. He then pulled with all of his might, resulting in the girl twirling through the air, landing face down on a boulder. William rushed to her aid, turning her over, revealing a cracked face, covering an empty skull. He felt her chest to see if she was breathing, to find that it was nothing but padding, like that of a pillow. Upon further inspection, he found a hole in the center. He carefully slid his hand into the warm, slimy crevice and pulled out the still beating heart that was no bigger than that of a bunny rabbit. As the veins stretched from the hole to the heart in William's hand, he began to understand. The old woman was a witch, and this had to be some sort of doll, a vessel for a spirit, maybe her daughter, driven by a heart that if too small, only lasts for a couple of weeks. This was what he had fallen in love with, an inanimate object controlled by spiritual puppet strings. As he came to his resolution, William heard a sound that sent chills down his spine. It's documented that the mayor and his mob searched the forest for 2 days before finding the large stump with the strange markings carved down it. On top laid William's body, with a gaping hole in its chest. They continued the search for weeks, never finding a cabin or a little old woman with bones. Years later, people started seeing glimpses of the girl, and after people started going missing and being found heartless atop the stump, they stopped looking towards the woods altogether, in fear of being led to their death by the girl and the old witch. Eventually, it became a memory, and then the town myth. One thing is true, though. The girl is real. I've seen her. Like William, I too saw her as a kid, and now, again as an adult. I'm looking at her right now, and I'm pretty sure she wants me to follow her. I hope you enjoyed tonight's story. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and the bell notification. Also, please follow me on Twitter. I think I'm pretty funny. Hit the like button, comment something down below, and we'll see you next time.